Oftentimes when people are in conflict or when they're in a heated discussion with someone, we tend to rely on our own habitual way of dealing with it. And that makes a bad situation worse because you end up putting your foot in your mouth. You make these knee-jerk reactions, pardon the pun. But you can't unscramble eggs. And when you say things abruptly, when you do those kind of things, you can make a bad situation worse. So
Hey there, peeps. This is Michelle Nedelak. Thank you for listening to the show. I would love if you could give us your opinion on how you felt about the show, your experience that you have in regards to what we've been talking about. I am having an absolute blast, but your input is like dynamite on that explosion. So give us your input. We'd love to hear from you. Any questions, comments, concerns? Give us everything you got. We love it. Thanks. I hope you're having an awesome day. Welcome to the Business Ownership Podcast, brought to you by Awareness Strategies, helping you navigate the waters between entrepreneurship and ownership. Hey there, peeps. This is Michelle Nedelak, and I'm super glad that you're here with us today because I'm here with my most amazing guest, Eric. Eric, thank you so much for being here with us today.
thanks so much for having me, Michelle. Can't wait. This is going to be fun.
It is. So give everybody the highlight of who you are and what you do for business.
Sure. Well, as you know, Michelle stated, my name is Eric Williamson. I work at the intersection of professional development, leadership development, and emotional intelligence. Bottom line is, I'm an expert jerk who turned jerk expert. And so I work with all different types of business leaders to help them mitigate that workplace friction so that way they can achieve their goals. And that's precisely what led me to author this book called How to Work with Jerks, because it's such a pervasive issue.
I love it. So how did you get into all of this as a thing?
Well, through my experiences of I would say being a jerk, knowing the impact, well, realizing the impact that I had on other people, but then being on the other side of the coin where I had to work with other people who were jerks, especially a boss, and hearing so many of my friends and colleagues about, I can't stand working for this person, I'm gonna leave, and all the stuff. I'm like, you guys are so talented. Why don't you deal with it? Well, we don't know how, Eric. So that light bulb moment kind of came on for me. I said, well, what if I put together a roadmap to help people who have been in similar situations like me, like my colleagues, like my friends, maybe even you, Michelle. What if I put together this roadmap? Not you, no.
Oh,
Well, what if I put together some kind of roadmap to help people to keep them you know, from leaving their job so that way they can enjoy what they do and not be bogged down by their toxic workplace. What if I gave them some strategies to help them out? So
right.
just through those experiences, that's kind of what inspired me to do it.
I love it. So now, who do you love to serve and support? Who would you say is your ideal client, or who do you comes to you the most often?
Well, I'm in the IT field. That's who my target audience is. So I work a lot with CIOs. And right now, well, I think over the past several years, they've been pursuing their digital transformation initiatives. And as a CIO, I mean, you have to be a visionary. You have to be able to think and plan several moves ahead. But they can't do that if they're continuously, trying to help solve their employees' problems of workplace friction where they should be able to have the tools to do that on their own. So I deal a lot with the CIOs to help them achieve those digital transformation initiatives.
I love it. So let's dive into kind of some of the strategies and um, tactics, fundamentals that you use to be able to lessen the friction. So give me some idea of kind of what kind of problems that you're looking at specifically, um, and what kind of tools they can look at working with you on.
Sure. Yeah. So oftentimes when people are in conflict or when they're in a heated discussion with someone, we tend to rely on our own habitual way of dealing with it. And that makes a bad situation worse because you end up putting your foot in your mouth. You make these knee-jerk reactions, pardon the pun. But you can't unscramble eggs. And when you say things abruptly, when you do those kind of things, you can make a bad situation worse. So in my book, one of the first things that I share, one of the first strategies is my three-step process for mitigating that situation. I call it the triple A method, and it stands for assess, analyze, act. Um, so what happens is when you're under stress, when you're dealing with these kind of situations, these stressful conditions, our body tells us this. because our heart could beat fast, our palms could get sweaty, our mouth can get dry. All these kind of things are telling you that your body's under stress. And so once you are in tune with what your body's telling you, then you can go to that next step, which is analyze. Why am I feeling this way? Well, maybe because I'm working with a jerk of a boss, or somebody's just really getting on my nerves, and I don't know how to deal with it. Or you could be stuck in traffic, or you could be overwhelmed or burnt out with certain situations that's going on in the workplace. And so once you analyze, then you could take step 3, which is act. Which means you could take a more measured approach. You can respond thoughtfully without that knee-jerk reaction. So the whole goal of this is to delay that response. So that way you can come up with a more thoughtful, more measured response. So that way you don't make a bad situation worse.
Well, and I think this is particularly timely because, one, IT is changing at such a rapid pace right now that
Indeed.
even systems that started 3 years ago that are coming to fruition and should be kind of done, it's like there's a question in some of them whether or not they're obsolete already. And that adds a ton of stress onto the situation that has really nothing to do with what's going on the interplay of two people interacting of, did you do your job and what's going on with it. But oftentimes I also find, particularly in IT, that semantics become very important. And yet very few people recognize that it's the semantics of the situation that's getting into the way, because somebody will go, have you done this? Well, we need the box for it. Yeah, but have you done it? Well, we need the box for it. Well, have you done it? Have you done your part? And we're having arguments like this all the time. And it's like, well, but it's very, semantics as to what I'm really asking is, have you done your part in getting everything done up until the point of the box? But for IT guys, I say guys, I mean everybody. It becomes too cumbersome of a conversation, which is why most of them love speaking in acronyms, because it just shortens a conversation, and hopefully you know what I mean. But oftentimes that creates that kerfuffle in the first place.
Yeah, it definitely does. And to that point, what I also see is that people, they avoid those conversations. So they just say whatever they can to satisfy the situation, just because they don't want to go to that, go that extra mile and have that difficult conversation. It could be because they don't want to, or they don't know how. And what I've been hearing, a lot of times they just don't know how to resolve the situation, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, and I also find that generationally, and I'm going to say especially in IT, using that as your kind of honing box, because understanding, one, that there are many different communication styles, but in IT they tend to think analytically. They tend to have a certain way of communicating with things. And I think the older generation in IT, it's all about getting the job done on time, on budget, and we're just getting it done. Whereas with the newer generation, it seems more to be about, have we communicated this? What's the end goal? Why is this the issue? Which tends to be a whole lot of conversation that the older guys are like, you don't need to know that. Just get the job done.
Right. Well, I need to know the why. I need to know what's behind all this. Like, no, just get it done.
Really,
Well, why
no.
are you talking to me like this? Well, that's rude. you know,
Right.
that
Right.
simple breakdown in communication, that can lead to so many types of unnecessary conflicts.
Right. Absolutely. So you made interesting um, pillars. In the first one is assess. Is I find that a lot of people that are used to doing don't realize that they're having a bodily reaction to anything. And it's like, well, I'm just, just angry. Okay, well, how do you know you're angry?
Right.
And we started having these conversations. So what are some of the ways you mentioned, that you get the sweaty palms, the heart palpitations? Is there ways that you help people to kind of assess the situation and kind of step back from, so that they know where they're at in the conversations?
Yeah, absolutely. And that just goes to the degree of self-awareness we need to continue to build and develop. And so when I do my one-on-one coaching with people, especially when oftentimes they think that they need help working with the jerk, but then they realize that they're the jerk. So then when we start talking, they're like, well, what are some ways that I can, stop from being a jerk? And so once I talk about that AAA method, and they're like, I never really thought about it. And so after a couple conversations, I can spot on myself and say, hey, do you know every time, I ask you a personal question or something that you might be uncomfortable with, you always do this. You always do something like this, and they furrow their eyebrow, they clench their jaw, and they're like, I've never really realized that. So it really takes me pointing those things out when we have our one-on-one conversations when I have my one-on-one coaching sessions. But when I don't have those one-on-one coaching sessions, what I do urge people to do is to try to stay present in the moment and really understand what your body is telling you. Because oftentimes when you ignore that, it really leads to other health issues. It also leads to bad breakdown in communication, poor relationships, all those kind of things. So I always teach them some self-awareness techniques to help them really understand and become in tune with what your body's telling you. So if it's not face to face, they have some other self-awareness tips that I share with them to help them practice that kind of self-awareness.
Nice. Well, and I do think it, especially in the higher levels, I think it's paramount that people are talking to people like you so that you can watch them and observe them and see what they're actually doing. I'll give you an example. My sister was in a high pressure job once, and she was in charge of training the newbies to come. And the newbies in this one setting quit asking questions. And she's like, you can't quit asking questions. You need to know this. I know this. You
Right.
need to know this. You have to ask me questions. And then like, oh, no. And then somebody comes by and it's like, well, if you quit being so intimidating, they might. And she's like, what are you talking about? Because when they would ask a question, she would focus all of her attention on them. So her eyes would squint, her brows would furrow. She looked mad and angry to anybody else on the planet. And meanwhile, she's just dedicating her attention because there's noise going around, there's stress, all sorts of stuff. And she wants to make sure she heard the question, which for a newbie is rather intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
Having somebody stare you down while they're trying to ask questions. And it can be as simple as, I say simple as that. It made a tense conversation even more tense to the point of nobody wanted to do anything about it, which is paramount in that job to learn. And I can only but imagine when the little things start happening, that people aren't going to notice those.
Absolutely. Well, I tell you what, you just touched on something. You've identified one of the two types of jerks there are. There's jerks who are unaware that they are jerks because no one's bothered to tell them. All right. It could be learned behavior.
Yep.
Or there's jerks who are aware, but they just don't care. Because they think that leading through fear and intimidation is the most effective way to get anything done. But when you talked about your sister, she could have been unaware that her behavior was, was bringing off, a certain, I don't want to say jerkish behavior, but that kind of behavior that people are uncomfortable with. And,
Well,
we
it's
didn't get into
intimidating,
it's
right?
intimidating. It's
Yeah.
intimidating, exactly. And we haven't even talked about what the definition of a jerk is. But
Yeah.
when that happens, when you have that breakdown in communication, that's a signal right there. And so I'm glad that situation happened. But if those things don't occur, sometimes people will never know that how they're acting until it's way too late.
Absolutely. So have you broken down kind of the the semantics of what a jerk is and kind of how that plays out?
Yeah. So first of all, let me just give you the backstory. When I wrote
Yeah.
my manuscript, how to work with jerks, I knew in my mind like what a jerk was, but I'm like, well, what do other people understand what a
Jerk
jerk
is.
is? So I went on a listening campaign, Michelle. No lie. Like I talked to, my family, I talked to my friends, but then I started talking to random people all over the place, like on the streets and coffee shops. What is a jerk to you? And I had all these different types of definitions, but I realized I couldn't put all of them in the book because, who's going to read a book that long? All right. Like a war and peace novel. Like no one's going to do that. So I realized that I had to come up with a definition that casts a wide net, but it still resonates with people. And so that's why I define a jerk as someone who doesn't use social skills as a necessary job skill. And so that's where when people attend my talks, when they attend my programs, that's when the light bulb moment comes on because people say, wait a second. If a jerk is someone who doesn't use social skills as a necessary job skill, maybe I've been a jerk before. Maybe I've been in a situation where I've lacked using those social skills, being able to empathize or communicate effectively. And so that's where people say, Eric, you got to help me. I could be unknowingly becoming a jerk. And so once I define it like that, that's where people, they start more actively working on how to, prevent that from happening again, or their culture, their corporation, or the people in their environment, they want to bring awareness to the issue as well.
Nice. Well, one of the most interesting things I heard once upon a time in my journey was if you can recognize the behavior in somebody else, it means that you have it in yourself. So if you can recognize that somebody is an excellent communicator, you're probably an excellent communicator yourself. If you can recognize that somebody else is a jerk, you're probably a jerk yourself. It's like works both ways. It's like, oh, well, in that case, bring the tiara. I'll own that. I am the biggest bee on the planet. And, let's break this down and how it translates. Because I think a lot of times people also don't realize how it translates. Right? So what's acceptable in my family is just being, that's just Michelle kind of thing. Right. And then going into the workplace, it's like, oh, now we have a different reaction. Or even on the highway, now we have a different reaction.
Right. You're so right.
So yeah, when it comes to kind of family dynamics, let's put it that way, things that people go, oh, that's just socially acceptable, right? And you're like, no. No, not. No.
Exactly. I mean, I can think of so many times where I talked to my family was like, oh, or my cousin, like, oh, no, that's what you said to that person. No, you can't get away with that. Like, dude, come on. That's like, well, why not? Like, well, here's why. It's rude. All right. It's not appropriate. Like, come on.
This is not your family you're dealing with. This is your employees. Well, and I also find that a lot of people, those dynamics, right? Somebody in the family can be, the counselor and the connector, and somebody else is the dynamic one that comes up with the ideas. And when we play out those roles in the workplace, we often create bigger problems than we had before. Things like, as a manager, if we have to get into the middle of every argument instead of going, hey, you two work it out, come back to me with the solution. Like, I don't have to play a part of this every single time something's going on. But how do you, as a leader, kind of decide when that's appropriate to let them kind of fight it out or moderate it and make sure that nobody's getting hurt?
That's a great question. And I see that often as well. Where's that fine line when an employer or leader has to intervene? Once you start noticing how people aren't working together, if productivity is falling, if people are bickering, and they're doing it way more than what they should, it's really impacting, progress of work products or certain goals. That's when it might actually be at the point where it's too late, where an employer intervenes at that moment. Well, now things have already occurred. People are already going back and forth. Products are suffering. Business is suffering. Now you need a solution that's quick, and you need someone that's experienced to be able to resolve that situation. Because now if a leader gets involved, they have to take all their time. And when I mean all their time, I'm talking about like all of their time away from what they're supposed to be doing to resolve that. And oftentimes those leaders, they don't have the skill sets to do it. They don't have that kind of knowledge base. All they know is that they need to get something done. And so at that moment, it's too late for a leader, I think, to really resolve the issue on their own. They're going to need some outside help. They're going to need someone who's skilled in that certain situation. So what I do is I have this conflict management proficiency roadmap. And basically, it really helps people understand just how proficient they are in terms of managing conflict. So I give it to, my colleagues, business leaders, and say, hey, look, where's your team? Where are you in terms of managing conflict? And this helps them understand, wait a second, they're at the basic level. We really need them to be advanced. How can we help? How can we get them to that level? And that helps mitigate that situation before it's too late, because once that happens, it's going to take way more time, way more effort to be able to help resolve that conflict.
Nice. Well, and how important is it that if there's a level of incompetency on the emotional connection within an office, to be able to go, hey, clearly something's going on here. We're going to bring some people in to help figure this out because like we can't play like this anymore. This is not going to happen. And it's probably not just you guys. Let's kind of bring the team in and this is how we're going to do it. I would think that just having that acknowledgement in the first place would have some impact on kind of the conflict that's going on. But what's your experience been?
Surprisingly, some people, it's a mixed bag, but some people, um, when I come in, they're like, who are you? Like how you don't even know what we do. You don't know anything about this. Like, how are you going to tell me how to, talk nicely or deal with this situation much more effectively? You're an outsider. You don't know, what it is that we do all the time. So it takes a little bit of effort to build that trust with them, to let them know that, look, I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to, you know, play, mediate and play referee or choose sides or anything. I just want to give you some skill sets so that way you can do this on your own, like we all should, as professional people in the workplace. So that way you can get your work done, and then once I start telling people that, look, you can spend up to at least 3 hours a week dealing with this kind of nonsense instead of getting your own work done, no wonder why you're stressed out. People say, Eric, no wonder why I'm stressed out. I didn't even realize all that. So that's one set of people where they're a little resistant because they don't know me. But then there's other people where it's like, okay, so now the light bulb moments come on. If my boss had to have someone else come in, that means that I need to do a better job my own of resolving this situation, because now I've just shown my boss that I'm not capable of handling this on my own. So now those kind of people, there's more of a sense of urgency. There's more of a sense of urgency. And then the people who are in that same group are the people who really want to resolve the situation because they just, they're afraid of not being able to deal with the conflict on their own. They're tired of avoiding conflict, and they know that they're in dire need to have those skill sets to do it on their own, because it's not an easy thing. It can be intimidating, especially when you're dealing with someone who is intimidating, or they're afraid of, to deal with that. So it's a mixed bag of the kind of people that I get. Some resistors, but then there's some embracers as well.
Well, and I would think too that anybody that does any international business, this would just be we have to look at this because people are going to perceive this as being a jerkish behavior. And it can be anything from, well, they didn't have a conversation with me before they asked about work. You're like, oh, okay. Like, so how does that kind of play out for you, or to what extent do people need to be sensitive of that conversation?
Well, it's funny you said that, because internationally, one of the things that I had to deal with, I was working with with an international company. Their parent company was based out in Japan. All right. And the Japanese culture, they deal with conflict completely differently than the United States. They don't even acknowledge conflict. And so while, one side is trying to collaborate, another side can be trying to do something completely different. And so that's where it takes a little bit more effort for people to understand that, all right, you may not embrace conflict, or you may not acknowledge conflict, but you know what it's like to work together as a team in harmony and collaboration. So you really have to do some digging and really figure out what their motivating factors are. Do you need to work together cohesively as a group because the business and the IT side, they need to work together, or do you need to work together to get a certain other outcome achieved? So even though, I'll talk about the Japanese culture just briefly, if they're, sometimes if they view conflict completely differently, you have to figure out what their motivating factors are to be able to resolve it and get their buy-in to be able to resolve it, whether it's conflict or whether it's team building or whatever it is, whatever that motivates them. You got to be able to find that commonality.
Well, and two, you could take it doesn't even have to be international because the states in themselves are so different. It could just be, cross states, and you're getting into those different cultures and those dynamics. And in some places it's just across the river.
well, especially, Michelle, especially if you're dealing with a toxic workplace, right? Mm-hmm. Where at the top, that you've got hands-off leaders. They just want, hey, I need you to do exactly what I need you to do. No ifs, ands, or buts. And then at the middle manager level and at the director level, they're just following orders, but the team is suffering. You got to be able to understand how that kind of toxic workplace, how it correlates to low productivity and you not even be able to achieve your goals. So it definitely takes some awareness. It definitely takes some time talking to the leaders and the people who are part of this toxic workplace culture to be able to help them understand that some of these factors, some of these incidents of rude behavior or people leaving or high churn rates or turnover, they're all symptoms of a much bigger pervasive problem. And so it really takes some effort to help people understand that you got a problem on your hand and here's how you deal with it. It's not an easy thing to help them realize. It takes some conversation, and it helps them, and you need to share with them some real facts about what's going on. But it is achievable. I call those people resistors, those workplaces resistors, because they don't want to admit that there's a problem. Everything's all, roses and butterflies and gumdrops, all those kind of things. But then when they realize, like, oh, well, look at my bottom line. Look how many people I had to hire because so many other people left. Oh, that's probably why. Oh, okay. Help me fix this problem. And that's where, that epiphany comes in.
And we haven't even touched on customer service yet. So do you deal with the interactions with the clients as well, or just internally?
No, I deal with the interactions with the clients as well. I'm able to get this a little bit more through like customer satisfaction surveys and feedback. So it's a lot easier to diagnose the issue that way because, once you deal with, and I was one of these people, once you deal with a jerk of a person who's, works with customers all the time. And that's what I was. That's how I became a jerk, because I was a jerk to my own clients, but when you get feedback and when you're not able to help your client, that easily gets to the boss, to the leaders, and they see those reports and they're like, look, we got to do something about this. Our sales numbers are low. And so that's a lot easier for me to help because the data is already there. And so some of the things that I do is I help them out, manage those relationships with their clients much more effectively, depending on, what kind of situation that they're having, because sometimes you could deal with clients who, want everything under the sun, or, you're dealing with clients, who are impatient, and how do you deal with those kind of clients? And so, I definitely have to work in that area, but it's easier to do just because the data is already available. You can rely on the customer satisfaction surveys and really be able to hone in on what specific areas you need to resolve with them.
I love it. So can you give us an example of a Cinderella story of one of your clients?
Oh man. Yeah, I can. A couple of them, but I'll just share with you one. I was working with an organization that was going through a merger. And this was about right the year after COVID, was like 2021. And they were going through a merger. So, there were a lot of people who were, tense conversations were going on, a lot of anxiety because people are going to have different roles, different responsibilities, different pay. But also right in the middle of the merger, there was this organization that was trying to pursue their digital transformation goals, which required them to work and collaborate with the business side. The business didn't really value or didn't see the IT side really wanted to have a seat at the table. But their relationship was fractured. It was siloed as well. And so one of the things I had to do, I had to step in the middle of this merger to help them achieve not just, digital transformation is it's a kind of a catch-all, but they were really trying to achieve some serious initiatives that year, and they were behind the eight ball. And a lot of the reason was because of the poor relationship between the business and the IT side. And so the first thing I did was I worked with the IT side, gave them some techniques about how to resolve or manage conflict on their own. But then I also worked on the business side to help them achieve the same thing. And then I had a training for all of them. And so now not only are they able to, work hand in hand, the IT now has a seat at the table. They're able to work together cohesively, and they're no longer fractured, they're no longer siloed. And to this day, people reach out, they're like, Eric, man, you really you really helped us out during this situation, because this is something that's been going on for years. And now, they're able to get through, and they're able to work together much more cohesively. And so those good news stories, I absolutely love hearing.
I love it too. So you mentioned a lot of the stumbling blocks, the decrease in productivity, the decrease in sales particularly, right, and just people not getting done. Are there anything else that you want to mention around what a listener might be going through in their business right now and thinking, oh my God, Eric, I need you so badly?
Yeah, the whole quiet quitting. All right. The
Yeah.
people who are either disengaged, all right. And I think some people, especially on your podcast, might know the whole impact that disengagement has. I mean, right now that figure, according to Gallup, is about 70% of people are disengaged in the workplace. But this translates to over $450 billion in lost productivity. So if your team is disengaged, if you've got some quiet quitters on your team, if you've got people that are trying to take part in that great resignation, you definitely need some help. You definitely need some help to turn that around, because it's only a matter of time until that disengagement leads to people just absolutely just leaving, finding another job. So that's probably one of the biggest factors that I would really encourage people to pay attention to.
Awesome. Well, I know our listeners are going to want more from you. So how did they start that journey with you?
Sure. So they can reach out to me on LinkedIn at Eric Williamson. They could also get access to my book, How to Work with Jerks. It's on Amazon. You could also email me at ewilliamson@tailoredtrainingsolutions.com, or my website, tailoredtrainingsolutions.com. And it's got a wealth of information about how to manage conflict, how to work with jerks, how to build relationships, because at the end of the day, it's all about building relationships. And so people can contact me in those types of avenues.
I love it. So peeps, we will of course have all of Eric's links in the show notes. So scroll down, open them up in another browser, of course, because we're not done yet. So Eric, at what point in life did you know you were a special kind of crazy enough to think that you could become an entrepreneur?
Oh man, at the moment I stopped being afraid of public speaking. And I would say that was about maybe 12, 13 years ago. Someone convinced me to join the Toastmasters Club. And I spent the first 4 meetings not saying a word. And I was too nervous. I couldn't speak at all. But then slowly but surely, I started, inching my way forward, getting more comfortable. And then I started sharing messages in Toastmasters. And people said, hey, you might be onto something here, So I said, you know what, maybe I can use my voice, to help other people. And so that's kind of really what, helped inspire me to take this entrepreneurial route.
Love it. You have been absolutely awesome. Any last words for our peeps?
I guess the only thing I would say is that, look, it doesn't matter how smart, talented, and gifted you are. It doesn't matter what role you serve or title you carry. Success in the workplace is not based on the work that you do. It's based on the relationships that you build. So I encourage everyone to build those relationships so that way you can work with anyone, but especially those jerks.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And I know how valuable it is.
You're so welcome. And thanks for having me.
Awesome. Peeps, this is Michelle Nedelak. Thank you for being here with us today. Be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your friends. We love helping entrepreneurs grow.
Are you running a business over 7 figures but still struggling with technology headaches? Pay attention, you do not want to miss this offer. This podcast episode is brought to you by Awareness Strategies, who is offering a custom-built digital adoption roadmap for anyone running a business over 7 figures who's wanting to grow their business in the next 5 years. And it's not just a roadmap, they offer full implementation as well if that scares the out of you. Check out awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap for more details today. The link's in the show's notes. Don't regret not doing this. Do it now. That's awarenessstrategies.com/roadmap.